Does anyone want to do a I am Turok?
Ooh.
Oh, you're primed.
You got Quaid.
You're primed to do it.
I am Turok.
I am Turok.
I love it.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. I'm Gooey, joined by my co-host, McKenna.
Hello.
How's it going, McKenna?
Good.
It's going good, and we've got some great brand new guests joining us today. We've got with us our good buddy slash patron slash emoji expert, Quaid. How's it going, pal?
Yeah, good. Just another day in paradise.
And we are joined by YouTuber, gaming aficionado, IdolismJ. Hello, Jay.
Yo, what's up? How we doing?
Great.
Good.
Yeah, it's a wonderful day. I'm so excited for this episode. But you're both new guests, so we got to ask what we've asked everyone. Jay, we've been watching your channel. You cover a wide variety of topics. Final Fantasy lately, fighting games, but even Mario 64.
Oh yeah.
And so I got to know, what is your background with the Nintendo 64 itself?
I was primed at the perfect time to be the 1996, 1997 Nintendo kid. So I was born, and I know this is a common question among the guests, so I'll just get ahead of it. I was born in 1990, so that puts me at the perfect time. And
right with me.
So I was, for all of the 90s, I was a Nintendo kid, because at 1994, my neighbors gave me their NES and all their NES games, because they had upgraded by then to the SNES and just left that stuff in the dust, and they gave it to me. And then 1995 or 6, I got the Game Boy Pocket, and I had my aunt come over, I think, with her N64 one family vacation. And then 1997, 1997 Christmas across all of the nation, who among us was not opening a Nintendo 64? So
if you were cool, you were.
All of the 90s, or I should say almost all the 90s. A quintessential Nintendo kid, and then I pulled an incredibly hard branding change in 1999 when the Dreamcast hit, and I've been a Dreamcast boy ever since.
Whoa,
Oh man.
Yeah, but my teeth were cut on Nintendo, and specifically the Nintendo 64.
I like to hear that. So now, yeah, you've broken free, I guess, of the being just a Nintendo kid.
Yeah, it was in the 90s. It was a little bit more important which side of the fence you were on. Hanging on to the Dreamcast kid moniker is a title of a bygone era, because Sega wasn't exactly around the war a whole lot longer after that one.
Yeah, it's coming back around now, though. The Dreamcast is getting, it's getting a lot of props.
Yeah, lately. I don't know when this episode drops, but we're only 2 days removed, and when we're recording, from the 24th birthday of the Dreamcast, which is really helping with me picking out all my gray hairs over the past couple years.
Well, it's never too late to wish the Dreamcast a happy birthday.
Exactly.
I've seen people say, like, that would be a good contender to do like a show like this, just because everyone says it has such a solid library. Like, there aren't a lot of misses.
It's also a small library, which helps.
Yeah, right.
Because I've thought about doing something like that many years ago, and I never got around to doing it, and I probably won't do it because it's a large undertaking. But as you've seen, my Final Fantasy series is going to take me a couple years at minimum, so I'm a little booked up.
Yeah, I noticed like episode 1 was like 20 minutes. So I was like, oh, and then it's like episode Final Fantasy 3 was like much longer, and I was like, oh no, and I'm like thinking about how much like bigger and
I've already
scope the game
glued into like I'm on Final Fantasy 4 now, and that's probably a 2-hour episode. I already beat the game. I wrote the script, and I'm like, there's almost no way this doesn't start to get real chummy with 2 hours.
Well, the videos are really cool. I really like the chronological retrospectives of things. Like, I was just like seeing how stuff like that develops. So I think the videos are really cool for that. As someone I've only dived into, like, I think I've beaten like 3 of the Final Fantasy games. So I've just gotten little tidbits. So I found your videos like very informative.
When I started, I had played a number of them, but I'd only ever beaten 7 and 10, and so this helps me kind of just cross them all off. And much like what we're doing here today, the method of chronologically looking at something allows you to see what happens over time and over iteration. So much like why we're here today, as this continues, we'll see more and more about what the Nintendo 64 started out as opposed to what it became.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I'm already getting that sense looking, just, thinking about later games and stuff like that. But Quaid, how about you? What was your experience with the Nintendo 64?
Oh gosh. I had it, I think Christmas 96, Super Mario 64, and just going from there. Oh, I've been a Nintendo boy for my whole life. I think my brother said, because my brother had an NES, so I had that growing up too, and he'd always give me crap for turning off Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 on him when he almost beat it, and I don't even remember doing that when I was a little kid. So we had Super Nintendo through that too. Yep. I
have a little brother story like that I'll be getting to. It's for a way later game. I don't want to give it away yet, but
that's fair. That's fair.
I have the added benefit of being able to bring my brother on the show and shame him. So
that's fair. My brother had to bring up that story whenever I got married. He couldn't let it go. Such a grudge, right? But
that will linger for sure.
It's definitely, there's times we couldn't share, like games coming up in the future. I remember we had 2 copies of Revenge because we had a share problem, which I thought was funny. But we had Super Nintendo and all that growing up, so I had that. I remember we had a Genesis at one point, but really a huge N64 kid. Remember like pre-orders. Remember like when Yoshi's Story came out, going to GameStop getting that, and a couple other games, just our special GameStop spot. But so
you've been there since the beginning.
Yeah, I just say I've been there since the beginning, NES and on. I don't know how, but here I am.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to have you both once again. This is the first time we're only talking about one game, just due to the way things are laid out. But we do have a little bit more content here in our flashback segment of what was going on. So if you guys are ready, we're gonna flashback and see what's going on in the lead up to Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. So we're flashing forward from our last episode, which was in February, all the way to March 4th, 1997. The #1 song of the time period was Wannabe by the Spice Girls. Like, basically that whole time period is like, this is the dominant song of the era. We have a lot of the same previous top 5 songs that we mentioned before, but one newcomer is Foolish Games by Jewel. And this was actually kind of interesting when I was looking into it, because it was originally, so that song was actually the B-side to another song of hers called You Were Meant for Me. And what happened was the album that this was on ended up being a bigger hit, like, I think a year and a half after it was released. Like, it wasn't initially a hit. So, like, due to the way, like, the Billboard and charting rules work, they wanted to keep that single on the chart, but they had to, like, basically reverse it and have the B-side be like the lead single. Very, very goofy situation.
All
but...
the records execs were like, "Oh, thank God it's a vinyl. We just flip this bitch around."
Good. Yep. Same old or not the same old single. As for albums, we had Tragic Kingdom was on top in our last episode, but it's unseated by Unchained Melody, The Early Years by Leanne Rimes, she was just hitting it big, and so they, released a collection of her early songs and it was big. And the album Secret Samadhi by Live. Any Live fans here?
Negative. I completely missed the Live boat. I'll be honest with you, I do recall this being the Leanne Rimes zone, though.
Okay, that's a good zone to be in.
I very much remember this being Leanne Rimes' times.
Well, actually, so I'll skip ahead and then we'll come back, because February 26th was the 97 Grammys, and she did, I believe, win Best New Artist even, and and Blue, that song that was up for a lot of stuff. But the Grammys were hosted by Ellen DeGeneres.
Hello, Madison Square Garden. Hello, TV audience. Hey, Billy Bob Thornton.
We actually watched them. We watched them all. 97 Grammys. The winningest person was Babyface, who produced a bunch of songs. He produced Tony Braxton, and he produced there was an Eric Clapton song actually that I think won like Song of the Year, right? That he produced, and it's one of those things where looking back, it's like this is what they picked. They picked a very like lame ass Eric Clapton song, in my opinion.
Yeah, all the other songs I was like, yeah, this is awesome, and then they played that one, and I was like,
they were all like classic songs, and then they were like, oh yeah, this Eric.
What's this doing there?
The tastemakers love themselves some lame ass Clapton songs. As if there's anything I've learned over the years.
100%, yeah. Artists who won 2 awards, we had Celine Dion, Tony Braxton, Sheryl Crow, and the Fugees. So, that's hard to argue with there.
Yeah, that's a standout winner selection. The winner circle's strong on that one.
Okay, so for movies, in our last episode, we talked about the top movies of basically the whole run was the special edition release of Star Wars, and it had like a 3-weekend streak of being the #1 movie to then be replaced by the special edition release of Empire Strikes Back, which is the #1 movie for 2 weekends.
Like, looking back on the I know you guys talked about Star Wars a couple episodes ago with the Shadow of the Empire episode. It is very interesting to hear older generations talk about Star Wars and like the utter grip it had, and it's just kind of like a signifier of just how strong Star Wars was when it came out. Because like my mom told me that my grandpa would just take them to see it like again and again and again.
Wow.
So like any sort of like re-release, like my grandpa was a huge Star Wars fan.
Oh, that's cool.
So like when those things came out, like the demand was still there for it.
Oh, it was huge, because that was like right before Episode 1 would release. But
yeah,
I think what also helped with the hype was Shadows of the Empire. That's what really got me huge into Star Wars, besides the movies prior.
We have heard that.
It's interesting to think of like when it was still incredibly popular but not bloated, and how long it was able to hold that position.
Yeah, like I mean, it's obviously still such a big franchise, but it's kind of like interesting what you were saying was like that it was like those 3 specific movies held such a grip over everyone, and there was like the books and Shadows of the Empire, but like, it was like for like a decade, just people like thirsting for this classic movie,
The secrets are at long last revealed. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
So I forgot this in our previous episode, or I missed it, or actually I don't really fully understand everything about this situation, but on February 5th, O.J. Simpson was found liable in the deaths of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman in a civil court action this is separate from the 1995 murder charge that he was acquitted from. So that was something I was hinting at, or like talking about in a previous episode, of like this was such a long drawn out thing that it's hard to know. It's hard for me to know, looking back when I was only like 5 at the time, like what were the big like parts of this. So I missed it. But yeah, so he was found liable in the deaths, but he was not found. He didn't. I don't know. I don't understand this stuff, the legal stuff. What do you think? Innocent or
Yeah, let's kick up these old. I'm getting back in there. I have no idea.
No idea. But that was going on. It was the trial.
It took me forever to just know that O.J. Simpson was someone other than O.J. Simpson. That he was like a famous like football star or whatever. Like I only know him as O.J. Simpson from the trial.
I had like a weird reverse engineer like back to why he's originally famous, because I was like, okay, like I'm developing memories and I'm just hearing about a guy who maybe killed some people. Then it turns out he's in like one of my favorite movie series. He's like one of the lead roles in a comedic movie series. Then I find out later, I'm like, oh, that guy was a football player. Okay. It all makes sense now. On February 9th, The Simpsons aired its 167th episode and became the longest-running animated series in cartoon history. February 22nd, Dolly the sheep is the world's first clone mammal from an adult cell. So cloning is in everyone's mind. February 24th, South Africa announces that it is making the largest blimp in modern history.
Did they do it?
I don't know. That's just all I saw. Well,
some consultant was like, "Hey, you guys remember the Hindenburg? How about we scrap this one?"
We'll look back. We'll see. Because they started making it. We haven't gotten there yet in the timeline. Right. So
we don't keep the press release out. We'll keep them wanting, but they're just gonna quietly shutter this one.
Oh, we have because we have some more pro wrestling fans on here. I figure we could do another pro wrestling update on WCW. They're still kind of cruising on the NWO thing. Like they're winning, so it doesn't really matter. But they're just kind of doing, NWO. Randy Savage is in there now. They're beating up DDP or whatever. But you can kind of see, as I was watching Raw and stuff, that this is when the WWF is starting to put their pieces in play of what will be like their big tentpole stuff. So around this time, Raw goes to 2 hours, Monday Night Raw, the competing show. Rocky Maivia wins his first Intercontinental Championship and defends it successfully against Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who now has a mysterious super buff female bodyguard coming out to help him. There's still some set up there with China. They're firing up Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's starting to feud with Bret the Hitman Hart. And they had their first, actually the day before Turok came out, they crowned the first European champion on Raw when the British Bulldog beat Owen Hart for it. So that stuff hasn't fully taken over for them yet, but that's basically all, like, a lot of their big stars.
And you can bet your bottom dollar that Stone Cold ain't gonna look at the referee and say, I quit, I submit, I've had too much. There ain't nobody in wrestling who can make me quit. And that's the bottom line, cause Stone Cold said so.
Were you watching this at the time?
I was not watching at the time because I was too young and pro wrestling was still it kind of like magically taboo, and so far as like parents didn't want you watching it. And in reality, I've always thought back to this, I'm like, they're right. Like as a 7-year-old, I shouldn't have been watching the Attitude Era. But it was so indelible in the culture. Like I knew everything about wrestling from just like book fairs and shit, because like it was unavoidable. I didn't know who wrestled for which company because I would just buy like fan books or like see magazines that talked about both simultaneously.
It's just like they seem cool.
Yeah, but it was just everywhere. Like we're all I think we're all modern wrestling fans here. It is, as much as we like wrestling nowadays, it is very hard to think back to a time when it was so unavoidable in the culture. And I
For
haven't made
sure,
my
yeah.
rewatch. I haven't made it to 1997 in my rewatch. I've finished 1995 for both WWF and WCW. So I
Wow.
got through
Okay.
the bad year, and I still like the
Yeah.
bad year a lot.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff for sure.
My mildly hot take is that 1995 is not as bad as people say it is, and I actually kind of dislike 93 and 94 more, but that's only if you're watching the television and not if you're just watching pay-per-views.
I think the
Okay,
reason they
yeah.
said 95 wasn't great was just because of how less popular wrestling was at that time.
Yeah.
But if you go back and see it, there's definitely worse things out there.
Yeah,
for sure.
Diesel blows, but the undercards are still like pretty good, and Raw is an actual TV show. Whereas like 93, 94, those pay-per-views are great. And Raw is like Saturday Mania level of squash matches and nothing. Who cares? So like if you're watching week to week, 93 and 94 are rough, but 95 is fun because you start seeing all the people who make up the attempts at getting popular. So like a lot of people start debuting, like Goldust and Ahmed Johnson, and like you know some people make it to the Attitude Era like Goldust, and some people don't. Like Ahmed just barely gets there and then falls off.
Yeah, he's still he like the last I saw of him, he was like feuding with Farouk. So like he's still around, kicking around in 97 for sure. I didn't mention too, WWF right around this time was like attempting their own NWO invasion type angle, because they start working with the ECW, and so they have, you see some people like who's the, like, well, we watched the Taz match. They have like guys from ECW come in, and they got Paulie on commentary, so they're kind of doing like, oh no, look at these bad boys.
Yeah, it's the working agreement between those two companies at that time. A lot of cool stuff from that. And if you get a chance, I'll also throw this out there. If you get a chance, watch ECW 1994's television. It's excellent. It's some of the best stuff. Really, really good.
You know, I've never actually like really watched like a whole, you know, I've seen like matches and stuff like that are like iconic, but I never really watched like a full ECW card, I don't think.
If you like wrestling that has a lot of heart and not a lot of production, 1994 ECW, like the lead up to when they become Extreme Championship Wrestling, and then afterwards, there's a lot of there's a lot of heart in that for a show that has exactly one hard cam and nothing else.
I think that was everything that we wanted to flash back to. What do you say?
It's time.
It's time. Why don't you tell us about Turok Dinosaur Hunter?
Turok Dinosaur Hunter is a first-person shooter adapted from the Valiant comic book series of the same name, beginning the game in a central hub level which contains portals to 7 other levels. You'll search for keys to unlock each portal. Across the levels, you'll battle various enemies with an arsenal of weapons, such as the tech bow, the shotgun, and the particle accelerator. He may be called the Dinosaur Hunter, but Turok will face more than just velociraptors. Warriors, aliens, demons, large insects, and more will try to stop Turok as he runs, jumps, climbs, and swims through each level. He'll need to collect all 8 pieces of the Chronoscepter to stop the Campaigner, an evil overlord who seeks to destroy the fabric of time and rule the universe.
Nice. I think that pretty much explains the storyline, just like as much as the game.
Yeah.
Jay, I didn't know beforehand, like how into Turok were you before doing this episode?
So I think the you were asking for people like, hey, who knows a thing or two about Turok? And my response was, I think that game is incredibly interesting. I did not play it back in the day. I played it when I was in my 20s, and I bought another N64 because I have little brothers. So some of the older game consoles that they appreciate, namely the N64 and the GameCube, I left with them, and I over time would rebuild on my own. And I bought it later in life, and I played it, and I thought, like, whoa, there's really not a lot else out there and from this time period that's trying to do what Turok is doing. And if I could put a thesis down, if you will, for just Turok in general on N64, it is very interesting to see a lot of the things that the N64 gets dinged for show up so early in the form of Turok, but then it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because Turok is a first-person shooter, a somewhat bloody M-rated game, which the N64 gets constantly railed as being the kids' console. It's a very good first-person shooter, and like then you hit the big comma, but it doesn't matter because eventually GoldenEye comes out, and no one cares about a single first-person shooter on this system that isn't GoldenEye.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think it's definitely, it's not even long before. It's the same year.
Yeah, it's because this game doesn't have multiplayer, and they don't remedy that for another like 4 games until we get to Rage Wars.
I think the second one has multiplayer. I think.
I'm not familiar. I never got around to I know like Rage Wars is the specifically multiplayer one.
For sure. Quaid, how about you? I think I got the sense that you were a big fan.
Oh, I was huge when I got it whenever I was a kid back, I think a little bit after GoldenEye. So I played it after GoldenEye, but as a single player experience, it was amazing. Just like, man, I could go hunt down some dinosaurs, but who are these guys? Like stopping me doing this all the time. I remember playing through it. Oh, you can jump and all this. The control scheme was different from GoldenEye. Like you actually move with the C. Different. And it's actually kind of nice. I like it that way because you feel a little more controlled. GoldenEye, back whenever I first played, I guess this is how, since we have the camera on, this was how I used to do it instead of like this. I was a kid that did it like that.
Oh.
So GoldenEye was a little rougher to play, but I, still would do it.
Holding on to it for dear life with your little...
I don't know how I played it like that, but now obviously I play it like every normal person with 3 hands, But
as God intended.
As intended, yes. Some of us are blessed with Goro arms and have a 4th one that's just there, like doing whatever else. But yeah, I remember doing all. I don't know how I figured out the cheats and stuff. Besides that one little book I showed you guys. But after I play through the game, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna mess around and look at these weapons and get infinite and just kind of do the chronoceptor. That thing, I just like seeing the screen go white because you
just like feels like you break the game.
Yeah, you feel like you broke the. You're like, I shouldn't be doing this, but it's fun to do on anything.
Yeah, with the cheats and stuff, you kind of like made me think of my childhood like experience with it was that it was the game that I think my friend's older brother had. So I never played this, but it was always like one of those ones where you're like, oh man, this is like, it's like a Nintendo game, but there's like you kill people in it. and it was just one of those ones that it's like it felt like like just the cool game that wasn't, it almost felt like to me as a kid. I especially associate because it was my friends who had like a PlayStation, but I was like, oh, that's like a PlayStation Nintendo game where like gnarly things happen.
Yeah, so, just how the just being M-rated, you're not used to games like that on Nintendo, but there's been games like that on the Super back in the day too, like Killer Instinct. Because I remember playing that when it first came out. I never played Gold, surprisingly, when it came out in 64.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah, I need to do that. I remember playing Wave Race and Mario 64 mainly, and then Star Fox and Mario Kart eventually.
When the cheats you mentioned though, like that was because I was just like playing it with my friend, and like it's his older brother's game, and so like, and we're just kind of like stupid little kids, so we weren't really like very good at it. So we were just doing the same thing of like, putting in the cheats, and then like, and then you can like blow this guy up, or like
now there was
him disintegrate.
Yeah, there was a magazine series. Now that I think about it, I think it was called Tips and Tricks. I don't know if anybody else saw this magazine back when we were kids. Yeah, I remember getting those a lot because those would always have a lot of the extra like cheats or tricks about a lot of the N64 games, other games than that. I think that's how I got the Turok ones even, and a couple other games down the road. But that lasted maybe a couple of years. I honestly don't remember when it stopped, but
Yeah, I can't remember when it stopped either. I think it was somewhere with the PS2 era where Tips and Tricks ended, but Tips and Tricks was a very fun magazine for its time.
Yeah.
McKenna, how about you? This was, I mean, I know this was you'd never experienced this game before.
So I tried to play this with the regular controls, and I was having such a hard time.
Yeah.
Just like trying to, I kept wanting to move with the joystick and not, use that as the camera. And
it is
so we
weird
figured
now.
out,
Like if you're like, I feel like a lot of us, our brains now are hardwired like the default dual stick controls.
Just playing it that way, I felt like I had to like translate literally everything before I actually moved, and it just made everything harder. Like I didn't have the reaction time and I kept dying. And we figured out that the left-handed controls let you move with the joystick. So
yes, it's sort of forward thinking.
I played with the left-handed controls.
I was trying to find the option to change those. I didn't know where that was at. Like change the layout.
Yeah. You can't really remap the controls, but it makes it so you instead, I believe it makes it so the D-pad moves you. And then your right hand is on the analog stick, which makes a little bit more sense, right?
You do move with the.
Oh, how does it?
The joystick, yeah. You move it with the right hand.
Yeah.
With the left-handed, and then the D-pad moves the camera.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's kind of odd.
I guess it would still work because then you'd still
Am I
have
saying that right?
You'd still have the Z trigger.
Am I mixing it up?
No, I think you are, because I think what they're thinking is your left hand would move you.
Oh,
I think.
Yes.
So, and I think what they're thinking is with this analog stick, they're thinking like this controls the camera. It's really based around like that idea. So I think no matter which version you pick, the analog stick controls it. So I can see where like if you're that is more closer to like a modern control scheme than even I think GoldenEye really approaches, because that's how you do it now in most games, is with the left you are moving your body.
Yeah, GoldenEye does have the same control scheme as Turok, but only if you pick 1.2. 1.1 is the one where you control the camera and then you turn left and right with the analog stick. And it's hard to keep track of all the frickin' control schemes you can possibly have in GoldenEye. But yeah, 1.2 in GoldenEye, if I remember correctly, is the control scheme that controls like how Turok does and how most games that are trying to emulate twin stick before twin sticks were invented play.
Exactly, yeah. Because I can see like they're kind of, because the controller, it feels like, the analog stick they really had in mind like a game like Mario 64 of like moving around in a 3D space. So they're trying to like do it for a game genre that I don't think like they were thinking about really when they tried to make the N64. You mentioned, I liked your thesis that you had on the games. I think those are all good, like basically points to hit. You meant like you talked about how it's like it's a good first person shooter, which you don't really think about on the N64. And I think it's cool to think that it is like the first person shooter on Nintendo 64, and I think they did such a great job with it, like right out the gate with like not much to really go off of.
Yeah, there's one other thing I'd like to like tack onto that when I mentioned that it's a mature game, because Quaid kind of brought it up. It's not the first M-rated game on the Nintendo 64, because that would be Mortal Kombat Trilogy. And I don't remember if Killer Instinct Gold was rated M. I thought those games were T.
Probably.
But I think I could be wrong. But like you can kind of backport MK and KI to arcades or other things, whereas this is the first purely for Nintendo 64 M-rated game, and also it's nowhere near bloody enough. because
Okay.
like to encapsulate what people wanted in the zeitgeist that was like the really edgy extreme 90s. Shooting some people and dinosaurs and having blood effects happen is nowhere near what people were craving, because you look at
For sure.
the PlayStation and you have like you have Loaded. That's the first game that comes to mind, is like that top down twin sticks shooter game that runs at like 3 FPS on a good day if you're facing the sun. And like that's like the Todd McFarlane extreme edgy bloody, like, you know, the game in Japan is called Blood Factory, like that kind of stuff. We just got it loaded. I saw the cover for Blood Factory and I was like, oh man, that's great, why didn't we get that? But like in comparison, Turok is a very tame, like mature, like, yes, it's bloody,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have that Mortal Kombat zeitgeist of edge and gore that people really kind of wanted. So it's very interesting how it is all the things that people thought the N64 wasn't and couldn't be, but at the same time could not hit the goalposts of what people were actually wanting.
I think that does come down to it being designed for the Nintendo 64 too. It probably, you know, like as opposed to the other games where it's like they port them over and they like try to censor them, but you know, a lot of that stuff's blood and guts is gonna still come through.
It might have been some of the theming that they had in the game that made it M-rated. Say, like, remember there were some enemies that were just hanging in a way, or like Turok getting eaten by the dinosaur, or things like that made it kind of push a little bit toward that. May not necessarily have been the lack of, you know, blood or anything.
You can't do any like some of the guns, like, you know, make cool explosions, or like the particle accelerator blows people up in a fun way, which is really and just in general, like, you know, the shooting, I will say, and like killing stuff is pretty satisfying, but yeah, it's not like you're not doing fatalities on anyone or anything.
There's like there's a tameness to being like, this is a, you know, Native American man hunting dinosaurs and other humans, that wasn't the bloodlust that people really wanted in the 90s.
Yeah, this is probably just like right above the bar of the M-rated. As Mortal Kombat's, you know, kind of over here. Bit of a distance with all their fatalities.
Yeah.
Doing all this, I've become very now fascinated with just the rich history of Turok.
Oh yeah.
The lore of the series. How familiar, how into that are you, Jay, and then Quaid?
Not at all. I know there is a 60s comic.
Yes.
It's like a very like 60s. I can't verbalize the style, but I know how to like say, hey, it's a 60s serial. You know, the Indiana Jones that's not named comic for young men, and that is the extent. I've never read any of them. It wasn't until much later in life that I actually learned it was based on that. It was an already established IP, but you know, that's the extent. All I know, it was a comic at one point.
Yeah, there's a lot of good videos out there. I can link to them that I've posted in our Discord too that gave a backstory on it, and it's pretty into it. Quaid, are you familiar with much of that at all?
I really was not. I didn't even know there was a comic or anything for the longest time until you linked everything. I did watch a gaming retrospective I linked in the podcast channel in the Discord, and the guy was giving us a little backstory of the game itself, like why some of the things you saw were like they were. Like, say the Long Hunter boss, the very first boss you fight with the Humvees and everything.
The Humvees, yeah.
So once he goes all that, once you kill him, you notice that there's a shift in the game afterwards. There's less real amount of those enemies and more of those aliens, or they labeled them as demons, show up more often.
There's some story progression.
Yeah, there's like a story progression in there, but because it's in 64, you don't really see that because of the beginning N64 era, you don't get any of that context. But it was cool, like, oh, so this is why it's doing this, and why you see a lot of the humanoids hanging around when you get to the campaigner final boss.
Oh yes.
You even find out that
was very intimidating.
Yeah. I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head, but it's Turok's like a title rather than the name of the actual character you're playing. That was really interesting to find out.
Yeah, so the original comics that were being actually Turok. So the person who created it, the name the name escapes me. I feel kind of bad, but it was created actually. It was supposed to be a spin-off of an even older comic. I believe it was called Little Hawk. That was a comic about a Native American that would appear in the old Lone Ranger like comic collections. Like, you know, they'd have other comics in there. So it was like kind of alongside the Lone Ranger. And for whatever reason, then they were going to spin it off, but it ended up being its own thing. And so it is this very like I haven't read any of those. I do see they sell them now in collections, but they're a little pricey. But if someone wants to get me a good birthday or Christmas gift, I'm very fascinated by this. But yeah, it's just more the older comics are a little bit, they're like tame comparatively, because they are just about a guy who finds this land where like dinosaurs still exist and stuff like that, and it's about him. He meets other like people there, and it's really just that, you know. Oh, he's off on some epic adventures and there's dinosaurs, you know. There's not any of this sci-fi element really. It's more of a fantasy, and it's not like bloody or anything. But then all the way in the 90s, it was the early 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Valiant relaunched it, and that's where you get into like it gets really edgy, and you've got, you know, now aliens and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And from there, like Acclaim acquired it,
mm-hmm.
and was like, all right, we're gonna relaunch the series. We're gonna make it like a game, you know, like we're gonna make a franchise out of this.
The name of the Turok in the game is Tulset.
Tulset, yeah, is the character in the game.
So I guess the original was his name was Turok, and then
that
became a title, which means son of stone.
Yeah, I think they were trying to like kind of imply that like there's sort of a continuity, but then as I've gone on, like watched other stuff, there's really not much of a continuity between stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, Turok becomes like a title as opposed to the name of the guy. But then later stuff they redo it and they reboot it, so you know, it's a little, it doesn't need to have a continuity though. That doesn't really matter. It's the history of it that's more fascinating.
Yeah,
like it has almost different interpretations of like how the land exists, like why there are dinosaurs there, who else is there. In a more like modern run that I was reading, it was actually just set in the real world, but dinosaurs never went extinct, and so dinosaurs are just still around, and they had like crusaders coming over to North America to fight them. So it's just really fascinating, like the different interpretations of the character. I had found actually this really good kind of journal essay. What would you call that?
Yeah, essay, research paper. A
research paper. If you Google just Turok Native American, you'll find one of the first results is this paper, Deconstructing Turok, the Kiowa Dinosaur Hunter in Comics and Films by Mark DiPaolo. And it kind of gives, it actually is a very interesting read because it kind of talks about the different eras of Turok and like both the ways that it like is unique in the way it presents like Native American characters, and then other ways that they each fall into their own sort of like I guess stereotypes or archetypes,
wrappings
that they've been yeah. So it's really interesting like how this, because it's not like, I don't know, it's not like this often talked about character or series, but it has had like all these different types of spins and interpretations on it. As for the game, so we talked about the controls, but I also briefly wanted to shout out that we end up picking up the Night Dive Studios remake of the game, where they just have full dual stick, and it's like basically one of the most satisfying games I've ever played.
Yeah,
I'm like cruising through that one again, and it's just like Ugh, I love it.
I have
So
the
fast-paced.
limited run game version of that and Turok 2. I got the physicals for them.
Oh,
nice.
that's awesome.
But in preparation for this, I didn't get to peeking behind the curtain. I didn't have the time to actually finish playing Turok. I've played through it a number
For
of
sure.
But this most recent time, I got like the first level in, and then I was like busy, and also Final Fantasy IV for the series. Yeah, spoiler alert, guys.
Understandable.
Spoiler alert: Final Fantasy IV is a really good game. But the thing that I really wanted to go back and make sure I was playing the N64 version for this podcast was, if I remember correctly, the Night Dive version does expand the draw distance a little bit.
Yes.
Mhm.
Whereas the N64 version, maybe we'll talk about it more later, but like, oh baby.
No, we can talk about it. Let's get into it.
Okay.
Because we can go back and forth between those. But the fog,
Yeah.
you're talking about the
The
fog.
fog of war.
Maybe the draw distance could be a little bit better, but I'm slightly charmed by the fog.
Mhm.
There's some atmosphere to the game, and I think we've talked about this before with other games of just going from like we're playing on our N64 on like a CRT to then just like seeing like the highest quality version of the original game that you can possibly see, and like some of the charm not being there, but maybe it being like kind of charming in a different way. But there is something, it does have a different vibe, I think, playing between the two games, and I kind of like some of the original like foggy,
It's mysterious.
aesthetic, though it is kind of rough.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's interesting because in my mind, I always think of the N64 version as having like a hard drop in terms of draw distance because it's so short, and just like you could see the line almost of where the draw distance stops. But in reality, the N64 version does do a pretty good job of fogging it to make it feel kind of mysterious, and as you are in the Forgotten Lands, regardless of how unbelievably close that draw distance may be. And the only time where that draw distance, like it is, I think charm was how you described it, Goo, and I think there's that to it, because really it's only so detrimental for the first 5 minutes, and then you're like, okay, this actually isn't that bad. This doesn't affect gameplay in a significant way. It just feels weird that I can't see that far in front of me. And then you pick up an invincibility power up, and the ecstasy kicks in, and Rhythm of the Night starts playing in the background. And that part's a little rough. But other than that, the fog isn't bad. It's just there's no way to not mention it because the draw distance is so low in that game. And that's not a
definitely.
Turok specific issue. Many N64 games have putrid draw distances, but Turok at least has it in a way that feels a little bit more in line with the setting.
Yeah, I mean, for most of the levels, it's like you're in the jungle or something. Or then there's another good video from Digital Foundry where they kind of they touch on some of the differences in the versions, or like there's also good like production history on it, and they talk about how they figured out you could like change the color of the fog in the game. So like when you're underwater and it's blue, that's just the fog. When you're there's like a fire level, and you go into some rooms and it's red fog. Like they make use of the fog as best as they can to shape the vibe of the game. Do you have fog troubles?
I don't know. I think the fog is cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. It definitely gives it a different vibe.
Yeah. I feel like when you're playing it, it's really where it starts to go to the back of your mind, and it just becomes normal. But when I was looking at like footage of it, I'm like, oh geez, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's like seeing in the dark. When someone turns off the lights, you can't see anything, and then after like 2 minutes your eyes acclimate. That's playing Turok.
That's kind of the controls too,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't mean that to be jokingly negative, because once again, like once you get past that 5 minute mark of like, what is this draw distance, you'll never think about it again. Like it just works very well within the game. They did a great job working around having such a small draw distance and covering it with fog in a way that works properly for the game as they present it.
They do a good job in the remake too of like expanding that. I know they had technical limitations to do that and still have it work the same way while maintaining like the original, sort of gameplay of the game. Though I did notice like guys can see you from a lot farther, it seems like.
Yeah.
They can.
And so there's
I know you're there.
Yeah. Kind of its downturn. But they get the jump on you and you can't do a thing about it till you see them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a big thing that I noticed in both this and Shadows of the Empire is sometimes you just come around a corner and there's just a guy like he's gonna shoot you. You can't not avoid it. Well, you probably can.
Well, there's some like moment. I was playing some today and I was like climbing up ladders and just like the second I got up, there was a guy right there. He shot me,
and you can't even get your like gun out quick enough to shoot him.
Yeah, something we haven't touched on so much is the platforming, just like jumping.
Yeah,
around it. It feels really hard with the first-person perspective in the Nintendo 64 version.
Specifically in that, I feel like.
Yeah, just, I guess the first section that we got to where we were platforming.
Oh my gosh.
It took us so long to get through it. And then we played it on the Switch, and it just feels like, it's like, oh, that was a breeze. I know how to do this.
Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, that's the really, I think we've mentioned, what makes Turok different and interesting previous. We never really laid it out, and it is a like mid-90s FPS that is very much a platformer in first person, and no one was doing that.
It's pretty Nintendo-y in a way.
It's very Nintendo-y in design ethos. And it's not like we get anything that is a exploratory or like adventure style first person shooter until 1998 when Half-Life drops. I think that's when Half-Life drops. I think like the actual developers were saying like we wanted it to be a first person shooter, and it was also influenced by Tomb Raider.
Okay.
Which like that comes through big time. So they took like the platforming of Tomb Raider and they put it into a first person shooter. A super dangerous idea, like crazy dangerous idea. I think they pulled it off, but there's some points in that game where the efficacy of how well they pulled it off is sure up for debate.
Okay.
But I think those are also the points with like that stick out the most to me, because I think it's like the end of level 3. There is a long sequence of
I know exactly what
it's just the tiny little squares. Yeah, that's the end of level 3, and it's diabolical. And you have to actually go a little further because it's like you have to do a bunch of little square jumps. If you miss, it's an instant death pit. And to do that, you have to do that to get to the end of the level, and you actually have to do that a little bit more than to the end of the level if you want to get the Chronoscepter piece.
Yes.
And that is just burned, and like that's maybe not a good part of the game, but that's one of the parts of the game that is most burned into my mind because I'm playing it and I'm like, who was fucking thinking they were gonna make a first-person platformer on the N64 in 1990, like mid-1990s? That's crazy. No one was doing this.
Quaid, what was do you have a similar feeling about the platforming?
I always took my sweet time when I had to platform jump because I always would look down and make sure I'm like right at the edge before I do my run jump. It felt a lot easier to do on the remaster.
Yes.
But you really had to earn those Chronoscepter pieces.
You did. Yeah, they made you fight for it.
But whenever you got to use it, man, you felt like you earned it.
Yeah, true. Well, unless you did the cheat, of course.
Yeah, I think
true, the cheat.
We realized that you could like fall slightly before jumping. Like, so we just like
you
just
can
run
dip down
and just
then,
wait
like,
for it
jump.
to feel it dip just slightly, so we get that extra
Donkey
distance.
Kong Country.
Yes,
like a roll jump.
Yeah.
Clever.
For me, the jumping was specifically the N64 version, and the way I ended up solving it slightly was I would turn on the map mode where you get the map overlay, and now I'm not playing. I'm playing top down, like the game is now. I am the triangle, and I'm jumping to the squares, and that made it a lot easier, though still kind of tough.
You did solve it another way a few times.
Oh, fly! Oh, and then the fly mode code. There's a couple. So, well, I want to talk about cheat codes in a second, but the other thing about jumping that they suggest is they're like, look down when you jump. But the hard thing about it is the camera control in this, it always resets. Like you have to be holding it down to stay looking down, and that's really just, I guess they weren't thinking of that at the time, but now being able to just like be able to easily look down makes. I'm normally not a fan of like platforming in first person, like particularly in like shooters and stuff, but I actually like now playing it on Switch. It's like I love it. I don't even mind the like crappy like the ones that are like you described that are like almost like ridiculous. Like I kind of find those fun, like on Switch specifically, even though I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? I've fallen down at the water obelisk a million times. I have to get all the way back to the top.
Yeah, I can do it on the N64 controls, but I have the freak gene that allows me to play the most cursed control schemes known to man. But I think you brought up something that's like really salient about Turok, which is like, man, this is weird and this might not be good, but there's something enjoyable about it.
Yeah.
When it comes to its platforming, like this idea of the first person adventure platformer, because it's not just a first person shooter, like it's a first person adventure platformer. It really divides the line between I'm going to shoot things and hunt for secrets like it's Doom, and I'm going to platform like I'm a game that's on the Nintendo. And for some reason, like it does do that platforming effectively. Like I don't know if I want to say good, but there's something about it where it's like, yeah, this is working. I'm doing it. Sometimes it's way harder and kind of unfair than it should be, but like it pulls it off. That's, I guess, the best way of saying it. It's like, this is a really, really strange concept to try and do with this control scheme, with this system on a console, not on a PC, and it pulls it off.
There's just like very specific little things in the game design or the control, like just like the way you shoot a gun, or like just some of the, like just in the feel of when you jump, where like there's something. I'm kind of just saying what you said, but there's like a wonky aspect to it, but then the way they do certain specific little things feel so satisfying that it's like it just keeps me kind of hooked and want to keep playing, even in the frustrating parts. I'm like, oh, I messed that up, but I gotta do it again.
Yeah, I think it's also, I think maybe the way you could pair it is that the game does a very good job of making sure that your frustration with the platforming is well rewarded at the end of it.
Yes, yeah.
Like thinking back to the end of the level 3 example, like doing those little square platforming bits is a fucking nightmare, but when you know that you've made it to the exit and you know that you know how to do it, then you also know that you could continue doing it because you know something is going to be there.
Yeah.
And that's like a very nice part of still having one foot in like the early to mid 1990s first person shooter design philosophy, where like if you are going to push up against the corners and the seams and the edges of this game, you're going to do so under the idea that you might find something. Like the shooters of that era, starting from like Wolfenstein 3D to Doom to so on and so forth, those are games that want you to really like body hump walls and press buttons because there could be things behind that. And Turok still holds to that design philosophy. It just does so with platforming instead of like looking directly at an N64 blown out texture and pressing A as you hold strafe.
Yes, exactly. I think you've described why, like, So like we got through it on N64 and it was tough, and now I'm like halfway through a replay, and I think I'm gonna probably do everything in the game. Like there's not much, they added like achievements and stuff like that, but I feel like I don't do this with a lot of games, but this is one where I'm like, I want to check off everything, because I don't know, it just like there's something compelling about it that I got to keep going back to it. I've been playing a little bit every day.
It's a good game. Like maybe we haven't like come out and said this, but like I think Turok 1 is a very good game. Like I don't think it holds that type of reputation culturally, but like this is a pretty damn good game, and I just don't think people were ready for that on the N64.
Sure. Yeah. In terms of, you mentioned the levels. I want to talk about, and like the exploration. I love too how the levels are laid out, like how you have to get keys in the. There's something almost. It's not quite like a Metroidvania or you know that sort of thing, but like it does have that sort of same element of like, oh, I missed something, like or a Zelda dungeon where you're like, oh, like I missed something. Now I have to like kind of backtrack and like find what I missed. And I really like that element of like how and there's almost sort of a non-linear element to it too. Like in the first level, you can get all the keys for level 2 and level 3. And I love that, where you're allowed to kind of more openly explore, even though it is just a series of levels. Even in some of the later ones, they kind of create them where you loop around to the same area. And so even that level itself has a hub where you explore off of. And so I thought that was kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say forward thinking. I think that was just like really solid level design for the time.
Yeah. I think it justifies the fact that the game is built off of a hub system, because the example you brought up is like really, really strong. When you finish level 1 and you get all 3 or 4, however many, maybe there's 5, I can't remember, objective level keys, like those are not necessary to beat level 1.
Yeah. Oh yeah, big time.
Like you can beat level 1 and then be like, okay, what do I do now? And the game's just like, hey, you actually didn't get the keys in the level 1 to unlock 2 and 3. And like that's what justifies the hub system to the game, is because every level isn't just a go from point A to point B. You do that, but during that time you do have to find the unlock objectives for the other levels, and not all of them are in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. And like some, they're like off the path, and yeah. There's one level where you start it and it's, what's it, like level 4? It's like level 4, and like you can get a level 8 key in it, and you have to like immediately go behind the portal and explore around to get the level 8 key.
Yeah, I think I remember that one.
And you do it, and it brings you back to the beginning, and it's like now it's like the 3rd key on the list, because presumably I think what they're thinking is you go and play the level and then be like, oh, I missed one, because you don't normally think, oh, I should look behind the start of the level. So yeah, the level, just the way that's all laid out is cool. I did want to talk about the cheats. The cheat system I think is really cool. I guess, what's everyone's favorite cheat code in the game before we go further? What was yours?
I'll just go front and say I never engaged with the cheats, so
I'll
omit myself.
You're not a cheater?
Yeah. No, I'm not cheating. I spent too much time playing Capcom arcade games, and so the United States told me that winners don't do drugs, and I just moved that on to cheating as well.
Okay. Well, I think I have some like good. I think I have good points about what makes the cheats in this so special. But before, there's just some fun ones. What are some of your favorites?
The disco one is
disco
awesome.
Mode is sick.
It's just like all the enemies dance, and you got the colors, right?
Pretty colors.
No, like in the disco.
Oh, in the disco mode. There's multiple colorful modes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It like cycles, right? It cycles through
Yeah.
colors. It kind of looks like it does. It looks like it does in the like invincibility.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
Thing, but then when you get that, yeah.
And then
But yeah, everybody dances.
They don't attack you. That's like an easy mode in a way. You can
We
play
were
the whole
actually
game like that.
There was the video we were watching where somebody
the mod.
built, like a party island.
Club Turok, I think it was.
Club Turok, where they're just all on disco mode and there's just dinosaurs dancing around. It's really
That was
funny.
also pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was trippy. I did get to watch
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun, like just like aesthetic.
I want to hang out at Club Turok.
All the bosses going ham. There's a lot of good, just like aesthetic codes. There's the wireframe mode was pretty sweet. What was it? Oh, there's like big head. You gotta have big head. You know.
What is it? Is it the tiny body? Is that what it was called?
Tiny body. Yeah, you can do tiny body and big head. That's pretty sick. Quaid.
Tiny enemies with giant heads, right? Yeah. I always like the big heads myself, just because of the like DK mode from GoldenEye. Always,
yeah, DK mode, baby.
Yeah,
always liked using that every time I play GoldenEye.
DK mode is classic. For me, the cheats, they actually, so yeah, I don't feel ashamed in saying this, but in playing it, we beat on N64. I used some cheats. I used it where reasonable. For example, like in that section where the platforming is really annoying, I'm like, I refuse to let this game take a life from me every time I fall. So I just turned on infinite lives. I was like, you know what, screw this. This is not. And so what I just found interesting about the cheats, you have that, you have like, eventually towards the end too, I think we did all weapons just to start using them. I wanted to use them more. We did those, and I felt like it's kind of cool because it's almost like it's like an early version of just like being able to, like, obviously there's the difficulty level, but then it's just like extra like accessibility features, you know what I mean? Where I was like,
yeah.
Or like, oh, I don't want to backtrack after like falling from that jump. I'm just gonna turn on no clip mode and just put myself back to where I fell off. So that for me actually made getting into the game a little bit easier. And so and now I'm playing, I just started up on the Switch version and I'm playing it, I didn't even realize, like a higher difficulty, and I'm already doing way better just due to the controls. So I felt like that was like I had easy mode, and then that like made it even for me like even easier to engage with certain parts of the game that were kind of like frustrating or bothered me. And so I don't know, I actually kind of like that they're in there, and that they're like, this was a memorable game for me as a kid because it was one of the few games that a friend or that I had played that had like from the start like cheat menu. Like they basically like, and they award you actually in the game for doing certain things. They unlock certain cheats. So I just found that like really, I don't know, like fascinating as a kid, that it almost encouraged you to use them.
I think they wanted a lot of people to finish the game and get experience, like no matter if you weren't very good at it, because there was like a curve to it, like you said, especially the platforming. I think it's nice that even having Infinity Life so you can actually see the end of the game was nice. Even just teleporting to the bosses, just to experience the bosses was always fun too.
That one,
I think the biggest repeat was always going back to the T-Rex boss. I think that was like the best fight in the game in my opinion.
Yeah.
Fighting the cyber T-Rex, and if you did die, he'd eat you, but then you get a cool little death scene.
The enemies themselves have their own little like fatalities, which is kind of cool, but they're still not as gnarly, I guess, as we're describing. But it is pretty cool that you can get murdered in a unique way.
Yeah, I was interested. Like, man, you fight some. What was it? Like at least 3.
There's a guy with some Hummers.
The guy with the Hummers. I don't remember if he had a unique one, unless it shouldn't get run over.
I think there is.
I don't think it did.
Yeah, there was, because I definitely died to him.
Well, I was playing through it again. I just remember the car would not stop running into me. The first car that you fight, he just, for some reason, automatically was directly going at me no matter where I was. But then the second one was like, I guess not as smart.
I didn't have an issue with them hitting me too bad, actually. My main issue in that was just it took so much ammunition to kill them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just
Oh,
like, that's the unique death in that boss fight is me chucking my N64 through the window when I blow through all of my ammo.
I just had the most getting slung up against the wall every time, just getting hit by the car.
The bosses are pretty. There's only 4, I think, and 2 of them are on the same level, but they're pretty unique for what they like, for being only 4 of them. I get like. That was pretty cool. The T-Rex is the standout boss, I think, over even the campaigner himself.
Yeah,
Definitely.
he really just would jump in your face all the time. He'd keep knocking you back. I don't think you took damage from him if he did that, but I noticed the lower health he got, he'd start limping a little bit. So you were actually hurting him, and he'd look more robotic. Yeah, I mean, it was just something you kind of noticed, but he'd jump more, but if he ever walked, he just seemed kind of like trying to get to you, still wanting to fight and finish the job.
Were you taken in by the story and like the need to defeat the campaigner?
If I knew the story, that would have been
There's a paragraph in the manual, which also has there's a comic in the manual too, which is pretty cool. But that's actually something I love about the game too, is like you just turn it on and the game just starts. And I think I've grown to like games like that more and more as I get older, of just like, okay, yeah, whatever. I like, perfect. There's aliens, there's dinosaurs. I'm going to shoot them. I'm going to jump on platforms, whatever, I don't need, read, if I'm into it, I'll read later about all the comics and like what the guy is doing, but just let me start.
For like the past like 10, maybe 15 years at this point, my buddy Vince has been on this vendetta of like, okay, when do I play the game?
Yeah.
And like,
that's true.
Time to game.
It's like he has like an incredibly low tolerance from like boot up to I want to play the fucking game.
I want to be in it.
It's like I want to be you play Turok and you press new game. Congratulations, dude! You're playing the game. Start platforming. If you want to take a siesta over at the tutorial section and learn how the controls work, you can. But you're booting up that game and you're starting.
Yeah.
Get to step in. The first secret's on the left. You have to start swimming.
Yeah, you take like 3 steps and a guy is trying to kill you. Stab him. Tutorial mode was fun though too. Actually, I kind of appreciated that. Was kind of forward thinking of them a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like they knew they had to with just a brief tutorial to be like, hey, we're gonna expect you to platform in first person on this controller, so we need to maybe lay some groundwork.
I will appreciate some of those bonus levels that they teleport you back to the start, even though some were longer, but like you wouldn't waste a life.
Oh yeah.
That I appreciate, because
those I find very
fun.
Also
helps you learn. Yeah, those were really fun to do, just because you knew you weren't going to die. You just,
Blue Electric Storm.
I love that.
Bonus levels. Yeah,
that was the most Mario feeling to me. Or I was just like, I'm just like in this side off like platforming challenge. Like, yeah.
They do feel very Mario-esque in their platforming challenges. And that's not a bad thing.
No,
it works well with the game.
I was expecting to hear do. We actually really we did talk about like it as a first person shooter, but we like just talking about it in context of the time, like that wasn't like a big thing on consoles really yet in itself. And like this is we're still kind of in the the 90s are the years where like with Doom and stuff that it's coming up. And I think for us, like, well, for you, like you haven't played, you're like, that's not really your style of game as much too.
Yeah, I'm not super into the first person. I tend to avoid first person because I'm really bad at it. But I felt like, at least with the Switch version, I was getting pretty okay with it. But I guess that was one thing I wanted to mention, is that I'm reading the Nintendo Powers, and it's talking about like climbing being this
it was like
revolutionary thing. That's not even something I considered, because I'm so used to seeing like a vine covered wall and being like, oh, I can climb that, which is like that's kind of a new thing with 3D navigation, just walking up to
Yeah.
a wall and going up.
I wonder.
And they exaggerate the animation of climbing like a lot, which
Yeah.
is like a good thing. Like when you're climbing, there's like a huge camera sway
Mhm.
to evoke the fact that your like left side body goes up, right side body goes up. Like it actually, like, they put some effort into it to
Well-
like make sure it's so exaggerated that you felt like you're climbing something.
Well, it did give you some immersion of like legit climbing. That was one positive
Yeah.
with climbing,
Mhm.
besides being grunt noises.
The grunts
Yeah.
are good, yeah. The
Yeah.
voice acting is pretty good, even though, like I said,
The-
there's a one standout line. There's some good
Yeah.
All one line, baby, all one line.
that carried the
Well,
game
there's-
though.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, what was the other guy? The hunter just goes, "Hey,"
Hey, yeah.
and then and then the campaigner with whatever he said.
Doesn't he like laughs and yeah.
Yeah, he laughs. If you die to him, I think he says the earth is mine.
Oh,
Very like maniacal.
sorry, go ahead.
Just thinking with voice stuff, I was just thinking of the soundtrack.
That's
and
what I
all
just
of
was
the,
thinking of. I was like, we gotta talk
There's
about.
like dinosaur noises that are in the soundtrack, and when
And,
we
like,
first started
tiger
playing,
noise.
every time I heard like an animal or dinosaur noise, I was like, "Where is it?"
It
And
does
then
give it this feeling of
it
like
took me a minute to realize like that's part of the soundtrack.
That's pretty
Yeah.
sick that they did that.
Yeah.
Makes you feel
It's-
like you're actually in that jungle.
Yeah.
It's very funny because like the tiger noise, I'm like, that's the audio sound bank sample CD that Hanna-Barbera was running through Dragon Quest.
I-
Like I know that.
I
like
love
anywhere.
it. Yeah.
But yeah, they did put like a lot of additional touches into the ambient track for making it feel like, hey, you're in the jungle.
Mhm.
Heads up.
The vibe, yeah, we've already kind of touched on the vibe, but I think overall they do a good job. Like such a like it feels actually like this would fit alongside like the Mortal Kombat world, like just in that sense of like the 90s of like throwing it all in the stew of like everything badass you can think of, like cyborgs, dinosaurs, shotguns. I don't know.
It's very ninjas, pirates, samurai,
Yeah.
aliens. Like,
But
yeah,
I love it.
Especially with the later levels, whenever the tone changes.
Yes.
And that music starts ramping up,
Well-
man. That's what gets you pumped.
That's the soundtrack is sick because every track it's like the composer, who I think did an excellent job, was like, okay, they must have told him like, okay, the vibes on this level are like banging drum beats and dark synth, and that's like every level is like a different like dum 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 wow, wow, like the, and then as you get in later, they're like, let's add like some tech noises,
Yeah.
but it's still like, like bum 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 bum. It keeps that same vibe the whole time, and it's also one that just keeps me like propelled through the game, where I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, it makes it nice because you get those alien enemies. You're just like, yeah, the music is just matching with it. It vibes perfectly with the whole experience. Yeah, and when you get those alien weapons too, you're like, oh, this isn't just about dinosaurs. Now we're getting some aliens up in this.
Yeah, it was cool enough when you're like, okay, I got a knife. Oh, I got a bow and I can explode. And then you're like, I got a gun. And now, yeah.
Oh, the tech arrows.
The tech arrows
like
are
you're just
awesome.
Yeah, tech arrows are cool.
Those were great whenever you get those, especially like you fight the apes.
Yeah, I do like that they give you a crossbow and you're like, man, what the hell is this? And then they give you tech arrows and you're like, that's what I'm saying.
The progression of like the weapons and stuff, and how you can find some in different levels early from exploration, that's really cool.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about like the actual shooting of the first person shooter, because it is kind of like the least interesting, like the least boundary pushing part of the game, but it is a perfectly serviceable first person shooter. You have a variety of guns that are of no real surprise, with the exception being kind of the crossbow.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything has, not everything, but most guns will have a secondary type of ammo that you can pick up that is much lower in quality, and you have to blow through that before you get back to your original stash. So there's kind of an interesting like, shit, I picked up the explosive rounds for the shotgun, I want to save this, so I'm going to use my other weapons until I actually find a use for the shotgun explosive shells. Because if I want to use the shotgun normally, I got to blow through these first.
Yeah, the ammo like management was like a really fun aspect of the game, actually, where and like not just that different, like some guns shared the same type of ammo. So I kind of found that fun, like where it's like, do I want to shoot, you know, like with the rifle, like shoot a bunch, or do I want the, you know, the handgun in this situation? Like, and I like there was like different, it did a good job of like at least convincing me that different situations would call for different types of weapons and different enemies, you know. I'm like, oh, this enemy I kill with this. Yeah. Had a nice push and pull to that.
Yeah, the like I said, I was looking at the Nintendo Power, and it actually gives you like suggested attacks for like each enemy in the game.
Oh, okay.
That's
pretty
yeah,
sick.
just like it had this whole spread. There's another thing I was thinking of, which is like not specific to Turok, but looking at a lot of these Nintendo Powers, there's like pretty much full walkthroughs in them.
Yes.
And sometimes they're coming, maybe not the full walkthroughs, but sometimes there's a lot of content in these before the game is coming out. And like just now we're in this era where a lot of people will refuse to watch trailers of a game because they don't want to see that much of the game. They just want to go in with no knowledge. But then they were just putting out all these details of the games.
Yeah, like early, I don't have them anymore, but I used to have a fat stack of Nintendo Powers, and it's really interesting the amount of walkthrough potential that could be found in them, because not every game would get a full walkthrough. Sometimes they'd get you to like the halfway mark, but like if it was a shorter game, yeah, they just straight up give you the whole walkthrough in the Nintendo Power. And in the 90s, that was fascinating. Like you could just learn so much about a game just by reading Nintendo Power.
And it makes me think too of like, I understand people who have sort of this idea of like, I want to beat this without using a walkthrough, like for the first time to like experience it. But sometimes I think people almost do that to the detriment of their experience, if that makes sense. I
as someone who suffers from that, you are correct.
Because for me, I think back to I always think of this because I'm a big Legend of Zelda fan, but I know people try to do that sometime with the first game, and I actually think it's a game you could beat with like without that. But the instruction booklet for like that game itself gives you a walkthrough for the first 2 dungeons. Like you're supposed to read that too, you know. So like I think, and I compare Turok to that too, because that is a game where I first beat it using a walkthrough, and then like every time I played it, I've like incorporated a different part of like reading the booklet or like some type of strategy from someone. And every time now I play that game just like casually. I can just turn it on and like it's relaxing to play. Whereas like the first time I played it, I was like, oh fuck, like this is so hard, and I'm like, you know. And that's how I see like Turok. Like the first time I played it, using the codes and everything, it was like to kind of get the experience of the game. And now I'm playing it again, like, and I'm just trying to do it myself, and it's like I feel like I've taken the next level up, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how far I'll get where I'm like, you know, I'm probably never going to be like speedrunning this game, but I view like, that's why I like these games that are like very replayable. You know, they're different. I think people are looking at some of these games from that perspective. I mean, it is fine to play it without a walkthrough, but I feel like it is a more modern sensibility where like now like games are so big and they're supposed to meant to be like this long experience that you don't really do over and over. Where Turok, I think right from the get-go encourages you, like you're going to be playing, like coming back to it, replaying levels and playing it on different difficulties. I mean, we've covered a lot of games. Turok isn't like this, but we've covered a lot of games where you beat it and they're like, okay, now beat it again to get the actual ending on a harder difficulty, you know? So I think I'm more just aligned with like that era of just like, okay, you get better slowly. Like you play the game again, you get a little bit better at it. I don't know. Before we wrap it up, we have some late breaking news on Turok that I discovered. Well, I didn't really discover. People just started like sending me this my way today while I was at work. But our buddy Ryan from Standard Definition Gaming shared on Blue Sky an IGN forum post where they were talking about the early days of IGN.com and how it used to have different sites. There was N64.com that IGN had, and they said this person on the forum said they had a memory of them talking about Weezer being spotted playing Turok on their tour bus during the Pinkerton tour.
Oh my god.
So then now we're flashing back again. But Weezer was spotted. So I tried to look into this. I was like, what is this true? And all I couldn't find the IGN covering this, but I did find a post from Weezerpedia. And they chronicled all of the Weez zine from the 90s, which is the Weezer zine. And
can I stop you right there? I want to vomit at the name of that.
Weezine? It's my favorite Pokemon. And in it, they're describing what the individual band members of Weezer have been doing since their time off of tour from Pinkerton. And they say, Pat has been savoring the Portland flavor, living happily in his tree-filled neighborhood, driving his Chevelle, playing Turok, and plotting the special goodness's future. So Pat from Weezer was playing Turok in 97. And then if we want to take it a step farther, someone else had pointed out, actually it was the band Bathroom of the Future, pointed out that James Iha from the Smashing Pumpkins, who performed at the Grammys actually in 1997, in his solo album, in the liner notes, I ended up looking this up, or someone sent it to me. There's some art where someone wrote him a note, and it's one of the cheats for Turok, and they're like, hey, try this cheat, it'll help you out. And he put it in the like liner notes album art for his solo album. Wow. And so I looked it up, and I found this interview, AOL chat they did with him in, I believe, 97. And they asked him a question.
I saw
AOL chat, yeah. They said, do you have any side projects besides the Pumpkins and your solo? Have you is one word. Have you finished all the levels in Turok? Please say hi to Bug from me. And he said, I'm a busy man these days. Not too many other side projects except sleeping and doing many interviews, and I have yet to conquer all of Turok. Hopefully someone can help me out there. So James, if you're, I don't know if he ever beat it, but I don't know. Why do you think Turok captured the alternative rock scene so hard in 1997?
Because what the hell else were you playing on the N64? We still have a lot of N64 trashing to do before we get to the golden days.
Yes, we briefly touched on it, but this was like you said, this is a kind of a gap from the last game, and like this is still an
you were saying with the flashback of the pop culture. What was it? You started at like February, and now
it's a month,
it's a full month where it's like, okay, what do we have?
We did one episode.
Turok!
Yes, and I think that was something in the Digital Foundry video. They pointed out that a lot of these early N64 games got a lot of focus. Probably why they could get a full walkthrough in Nintendo Power, because there wasn't really a ton of games. So,
N64 has no games.
Oh my god, yeah. I can't, how do I in an audio format, how do I spoiler tag me saying N64 has no games so that you hover over it and you see that I've misspelled games?
Well, what's nice for us is that we're just jumping, we'll be jumping right to the next games, and so we won't feel that drought as much because we're on a schedule here.
Yeah.
And
we won't feel that drought because we're in our 30s.
Yeah, that's true. We also have lives and like jobs. Unfortunately, this isn't, our job. If our job was to play N64, that'd be pretty sick, though.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts that anyone wants to add for Turok before we go?
Yeah, I want to restate the thesis I put at the very beginning.
I love
This is
it.
a very good and very interesting game that did a lot of cool things. It didn't push the boundaries enough for people to remember it regarding the bloody 90s, like extreme grimdark zeitgeist. And it also is just going to get its lunch stolen and eaten by GoldenEye
Yeah,
because it didn't have multiplayer.
which
It's a very good game, just it's not fully fleshed out in the ways it needed to be, which is multiplayer. Because even if it was on PC, because I was about to say this would be a better game on PC, but actually that's not the case.
because they did do a
Like-
PC release actually,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
apparently it didn't run as well, and it didn't have the underwater music.
It's
So
even if you were like thinking of like Quake,
mhm.
it's a first person single player game, yes, but we remember that for deathmatch. Even like Half-Life 1 has Half-Life deathmatch. Turok doesn't have a deathmatch mode.
Yeah,
And it kind of puts its own foot in the grave that way, despite the fact that it is a very good single player first person shooter, and it's not like a short one.
no, definitely
Like this game has a lot of levels. They're not boring. Like they're paced very well. It's a game that's going to take you some time to beat it, and it's not going to waste your time, which ironically makes it a kind of better game to play nowadays, because there's no way to like get rid of the elephant in the room. This shit just gets blown out of the water by GoldenEye
Yeah.
when GoldenEye shows up. And I think Goo, you mentioned that you like this as a single player game more than GoldenEye.
No, I saw
I-
someone say that. I think I liked someone saying it because I just liked it because I like a hot take sometimes. I
Yeah.
don't fully agree with that, but with what you're
I can understand it. I can absolutely understand it because this is a articulation of first person single player that I do think is very, very, very good. I think the way GoldenEye does it is better,
Yeah.
but that's just because I think the way GoldenEye does it is phenomenal. It's like it's comparing an A- to an A+. Turok is still really, really good. And if you are out there and you've never really caught on to what Turok 1 is doing, and you've never really had an idea of why anyone would play this game because GoldenEye is sitting in the same room as it, now's a good time to play it.
yes,
You're not stuck in 1997 anymore. It's actually a really, really good play nowadays, as long as you can handle the idea of platforming in first person. But that's also kind of why the game's like super cool.
I will say too, like the remake that Night Dive did is so good. Like they did such a good job with it.
Yes. It is also, that's a good point. It is available modernly.
So like if you're
like
It is worth playing modernly.
it's worth
Yes.
playing in a modern setting with the modern remake.
Like if you don't have a Switch, you can get it on PC, Steam.
And they
too.
just announced that they're going to be remaking Turok 3 too, because they already have Night Dive already has Turok 1 and 2 remakes done, and they just announced maybe like 3 weeks ago that they're going to be remaking Turok 3.
Yeah, we need to do a whole like kind of episode touching on them because their story is very interesting and that I only really just kind of got into because I was not like paying attention to like, well, I was hearing about the Quake stuff when they did that and that came out, and so now I'm starting to like, discover like that studio, and their story is interesting, and I think they're doing us all a favor in terms of like gaming preservation. It's very awesome. And so this is the first game we've covered that I've been like please, like if you haven't played it, you really should play it. You really should try it because like Mario, I don't gotta tell you that.
Yeah, it's the first game so far in the N64's lineup that could be considered a hidden gem. Because up till now, it's either like it's the big hitters or it's the sports games that are there.
They're there.
This is the first game that actually has worth and gets overshadowed by something. So you might not know about it as well as you should.
Definitely agree. Quaid, do you have any final thoughts on Turok before we get out of here?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to, since we didn't really talk about it, but I do have a Game Shark and got to experience the cheats. Yeah,
I bought one actually over.
Did you?
We were visiting McKenna's family in June. I bought one at a shop there and then forgot to bring it home with me. But we're gonna get it. It's there at her parents' house. We're gonna get it, and we're probably gonna like. We've been doing bonus episodes, and we're probably gonna do. I want to kind of like incorporate Game Shark stuff as like a side feature because we've been in some of them. They've been like variety stuff. But please feel free to tell me about some of what you experienced with the Game Shark.
Well, so far it's the only game I've gotten to work on my Game Shark since I've used it for the Pat. I haven't used it in like 20 years, but it's really only good for Turok 1 if you really don't want to put in those cheats every time you start playing it.
Oh.
So if you don't want to put in each code, that's really all it's good for on this game. It's just, I don't want to put in cheats, just activate them. That's it.
Well, I appreciate the teaser for the Game Shark. The Game Shark will be in play in later appearances.
And there are other versions of the Game Shark, but if you have it, the most updated one is 3.3.
Okay.
It should say it's somewhere on your Game Shark. I'm not really knowledgeable with that, but mine just has that little sticker like
ooh, nice.
There. That's the only reason why I know mine is
fancy
and sparkly. But I would love to get this to work on other games. I just have not yet, especially GoldenEye, because I was talking about it has a lot more bonus to GoldenEye, but I won't go into that until if
we've talked too much about GoldenEye and how it overshadows poor little Turok. Stop bullying Turok.
We keep bullying Turok with gold. GoldenEye. Yeah, that's always been the problem with the game, but it's still worth playing. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, I think same sentiment with the try it out, especially if you have a Switch. Yeah, I'm playing it through on the Switch and I'm enjoying it, even though I'm not really a big first-person fan. The platforming feels smooth, a lot smoother. It feels good. The game it feels much more fast-paced.
Oh yeah,
too.
I'm like fucking flying around in this.
Zooming through the game.
It's so awesome. I love it.
It's fun.
I think it's the FPS jump with the Switch or on any new console remaster. It just goes much faster. Besides the vision increase,
I saw obviously.
But yeah, you definitely.
I saw on the Switch like it does dip more than like the other releases because the Switch the hardware isn't as good or whatever. But I haven't really had that problem. But I also don't notice that stuff as much. So
you thought they were extinct. They're back. Mutated and far more dangerous. Now they want the Earth back. Only one man with mammoth firepower and a taste for big game can make dinosaurs extinct again. Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. From Acclaim.
We have dipped our toes into our next games, so everyone be ready for next month where we're doing another twofer. We're going to be talking about FIFA Soccer 64 and Blast Corps, which should be I don't know. It's been well, we don't want to spoil how we feel yet, but it's going to be a fun episode. Thanks to both of you guys for coming on. This is a great episode. It's great talking to you. And we appreciate your all your different insights on the Turok games. Turok game.
No problem. Glad we were here. Happy to be part of it.
Definitely love to have you back sometime. As for us, well, actually, don't mean to be rude. Why don't you guys plug your stuff first? Tell people, Jay, we talked about your YouTube, but throw out all your plugs.
Yes, plug-in time, baby. You can find me on Twitter at IdolismJ. That is IDOLISMJ. Pretty big on Twitter, if I must say so myself. I'm a When it comes to the fighting game community, I'm like a B+ niche celebrity. So
Yeah.
if you want the good posts, you go there. But I'm also on Blue Sky at IdolismJ.social.bsky or whatever the heck that is, because Blue Sky is actually kind of rad and
It is
a great replacement for whack ass Twitter. That's actually how I found the pod, of all things, because I never would have found it on whack ass Twitter. I found it on Blue Sky, and that's how we were here. But the big important one is also, if you want to go to my YouTube channel, which is a very, very good YouTube channel, I must say so myself. It is, once again, IdolismJ, IDOLISMJ, just the letter J. I do video essays on a variety of topics, but primarily non-review structured formats. So that is talking about like critique and analysis of certain things, but not actually reviewing games outside of the long form series I have that is covering chronologically all the Final Fantasy games. Outside of that, you can just find general non-review topic-based videos out of myself, as well as using my extensive fighting game knowledge to help make competitive primers and breakdowns for old, kind of unknown fighting games and how to play them competitively. Once again, YouTube at IdolismJ. It's the good shit.
I highly recommend
Source
it.
Vote 5 stars.
I've been enjoying your channel lately.
Thank you.
And yeah, I agree. Your sentiments about Blue Sky. It's a pretty chill place.
Blue Sky's pretty chill.
I'm glad we met. It was great. It was great to have you on. Hopefully we cover some fighting games. You can come back on. I know what games you're interested into, so.
Yeah, to peek behind the curtain, Goo was like, "Hey, so what other games would you like to be on here?" And I just I looked at like the next year of releases, and I wrote down the games that I'm familiar with, and I stepped back, and I was like, "That's all the shitty fighting games." Interesting how that happens.
Well,
it's almost like I have a genre I'm a specialist in.
Well, it's great because I'm sure, as you heard on our other fighting games we covered, we brought in my good pal Connor, because both of us we're like really crappy at them. We don't know anything about them, so we always appreciate having some experts on too, because when I hear like the people who are really into it talk about it, like I really understand it and appreciate it. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's just not like fully clicked with me in a way. So
yeah,
really appreciate those.
You gotta have the freak gene for fighting
games.
You're a sicko or you're not a sicko. It's really the kind of thing. But I'm done. That's all my plugs. Quaid, you got it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Quaid, what do you want?
So I'll be pretty short. I just got my Twitter and my Blue Sky handle at Quaid Runner. I think my YouTube's the same way. On there, I just put like uploads of one game I play a lot of once in a while. It's called Ultimate Double Dragon, and it's just a improved version of Super, if you ever played that on the Super Nintendo. Other than that, it's really just posting a few other things here and there, and I'm always active on the Discords.
Yes.
Whenever there's discussion, you always see me up there, and I'm always working on fun emoji ideas
to plug
gifts.
To plug you, I would plug our Discord, because you're such a great addition. Always making the fun emojis.
Yeah.
Always present at game nights.
Those are always a fun time.
We're
always
building stuff with
people.
you in Minecraft.
Yeah.
Going on adventures. It's great times.
Everybody piling in on the gourmet race channel to see what the hell they're kind of cooking up. You got the good shit going on.
If you're looking to drool over some good food, you oughta head over to the gourmet race channel.
The food channel in the Flashback 64
popular
is where it's at.
Hey, everybody loves food.
McKenna is a wonderful cook and
McKenna's got this thing on lock.
It's my domain.
Okay, so as for us, we always want to thank our pals Corey and Nico for come up with our logo and our soundtrack, our theme, respectively. Thank you, as always. You can, that we're on a million things, so whatever you're listening on, you do the like, subscribe, review, comment, whatever thing you're listening on, stop right now, go into the other features and do all that stuff. We're on Twitter and Blue Sky. We're Flashback 64 Pod on both of those. Oh, we have Instagram now too.
Yeah.
Are we on there? Search Flashback 64. If you can think of a way to contact us, you can email us at flashback64@pod@gmail. I'm trying to get it covered on most things that I can stand to look at and use. But we'll see.
We're in places.
We're in places.
Online.
We're online. And yeah, we got our Discord below, which is I think the best place to come and talk to us. Like I said, you talk about food and whatever else. It's a fun place. And we're on Patreon now too. We have Patreon, Flashback 64 on Patreon. Just $1 to just support the show. We really appreciate it. Quaid is a superstar patron. So thank you for being a patron and a guest on the show. Man of many roles. Yeah, other than that, thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you when we talk about FIFA Soccer 64 and Blast Corps.